Hey everybody, it's Kat, super casual Saturday Kat. No makeup, barely there hair, all the good stuff. But I wanted to pop in because I had a couple of questions about creative mapping and sort of the journey process and what it is. Of course, a lot of these questions come kind of singularly in emails on the back end. And I thought, this is a good topic, and I haven't talked about creative mapping for a long time and why the journey process is so compelling. So, what I want you all to remember is to think back to your first maps, the first way in which you saw a map as a representational tool. Travel back inside and think about the youngest years and storybooks as a kid, and where you saw arrows or a little dotted path to indicate a walking path or a trail. I want you to think back in your own memory to where and how you loved maps or unfolded maps or held the map in the car as you were going on vacation. I want you to think about mapping as a whole energetic field that informs you, that delights you, that inspires you. My own memory of maps has been a big part of the journey. My memory of myths in the beginning of my life is a big part of how I've designed journey work. But I want you to think about storybooks, like opening up the inside of the storybook of Winnie the Pooh and seeing the map of the 100-Acre Wood. I want you to think about how some of your earliest memories of maps, narrative maps, a story being told in image, informed you page to page to page when you were a little kid, when you were a child, when you were just learning. Think about the directionality of a book and how page to page to page, you were informed by the story and you started to live into that story, unfolding or turning, moving you literally from part of the story to the next part of the story through the pages of a book. I think most of us, that's our earliest memory of narrative process and creative mapping in a form, and we call that form a book. But then I want you to think about when you were a little bit older and you started to use a map. And most of us, we all came up with paper maps, right? Or books of maps, or going to a museum and seeing a map, or going to a place, a sacred place or a monument, or a little town nearby. And how did you know where you were? Well, you looked at that marker that told you where you were on the map or in the town or where the monument stands in relationship to other monuments. I want you to think about what that means when we're living our life and we take that kind of material to the creative and we start to work with representational images and energies to tell our story or to draw us into that particular page in the journey, or turning the page and moving from one place to another. When I talk about creative mapping and journey work, and we talk about themes that hold shadow stories and difficult pain or memory, there can be that kind of backing away from it. Like, I've done this work, I don't want to do it again, or I don't want to trigger, an old story. I don't want to do creative mapping about the landscape of tears and fears. Like, that doesn't sound fun for the summer. But I actually design process in a way where you're not necessarily going to fall into the abyss of the feelings of the tears and the fears. You're going to go into it like you're looking at a map. You're actually going to design it with reference that may not be figurative. Look behind me. It's like you can see images there that might evoke certain memories. But we're actually working with creative mapping outside of the form of figurative images. So we're going to use multiple perspective to play with, ideas. And so creative mapping can take a million different forms. Think about creative mapping in the context of the story or the inside of a book, the Winnie the Pooh forest. It's like doodles and marks and a map with a key and different ways of symbolically representing what you know of this place. In the topography map, you're looking down from above and you're looking at the elevations of what it is. And then if you look from another perspective, it's like looking at the strata of the layers of experience, like you're in the Grand Canyon looking up at all of the layers of life. So creative mapping can take a million different forms, and I integrate a lot of forms into the journey work that talks about using figurative imagery to map. But in Alchemy of the Heart, we're actually going to tap into the energy, and we're going to tap into the layers of experience, and we're going to look from different perspectives. And I think that that's really interesting, and it's really new. It's actually a new technique that I'm bringing in this next journey. Because I'm always interested in shaking up the creative ways, and actually starting to learn new techniques and fun ways to experience art making in the journey. So I think that kind of expansion of the, what would I call it? The creative language of mapping our journey is always, to me, evoking something of my childhood and inspires me because I love working with the idea of mapping. And creative mapping gives us a little buffer zone from the full experience of diving in or feeling like, oh my God, I'm going to get lost in, the kind of the abyss of the feelings. And I'm going to lose myself. I'm afraid because I don't want to lose myself. So I think creative mapping actually gives us a buffer. And one of the things about art making is that we take our feelings from inside our body, inside our mind, inside our memories, and we put it out onto the page. And that actually allows us to, give ourselves some space from it. I mean, giving ourselves space is part of the art making process. Creative mapping, is part of the art making process. And I think what is so invitational is to say, can I create space for myself to be in process without being there, without being back in that place of that pain? And that's what I try to offer and make space for, and actually give techniques and tools for within the journey. And I think that that's an extremely powerful way to experience process, to really, really, really experience what it is to know and need to know, and then use that new knowledge to grow. That's really what the journey is about. And so this new Alchemy of the Heart offers us a way to be with what has been sources of pain, but to move us into the treasure and then the pleasure of experience. We're always going to move through and into new layers of experience within the journey. I couldn't offer a journey process without that. So I think that one of the things that creative mapping does is that it allows us to create exactly what we need in a moment. And we're always coming into our journey process as we are in this moment. And that's always new. That's actually never the same. So all of the ways in which the journey leads us and guides us is always very current. So if we're creating a map and using, in this case, I'm actually bringing in imagery of different ways that water looks. We know this from snowflakes and the way that water holds certain patterns. And we look through that to say certain patterns of water will be changed by our intentions. But we're going to look at the patterns that are created in different states of emotion. And we're actually going to work with imagery of patterns of tears and the energy of the emotional state that makes those patterns. So I'm bringing in a lot of non-figurative imagery and techniques as we move into relationship with our prima materia in Alchemy of the Heart. And of course, we're creating our own mapping process that's going to give us exactly what we need. So if we need more buffering and more separation and more distancing, you're going to have all kinds of techniques of perspective so that you can really be exactly where you need to be in your process. But Alchemy of the Heart is a whole next level of transmutation and metamorphosis of the tears and the fears, and moving into working with parts of self and the inner alchemist, and then moving through the transformative process within the heart, within the alchemical heart. Whole new level of work. So I'm getting really excited because women are gathering in and I'm seeing our tribe grow, and it's a really small group process. So it's going to be about 20 of us doing this for 10 weeks. It's going to be so juicy. But I just thought a little bit more about mapping and kind of evoking your own memories of the map, the brilliance of the map, the beauty of the map, the purpose of the map, and what that means within our own creative process. All the different ways that we experience the journey work, experience our art making as a whole, as a form of mapping, as a form of creative mapping, where the map tells us the story. There's something so beautiful about that. I invite you within every offering to step into the story, to step into the journey, and to redefine and realign the journey through the story. And we talk about restorative healing and restoring our stories, the way we hold our stories, the way we know our stories, the way we need our stories, but then the transition where the stories start to change. We don't need them the way they used to be. And in fact, we're activating change within the journey process, and the creative mapping is an agent of change. And so it's extraordinarily exciting for me to do this work. I create this work because I love it. I create new themes because I feel that we need these new themes. Life, can feel a little bit like, ooh, it's right there all the time. And sometimes the journey allows us to be in process in ways that create safety. I create the container. I'm creating a timeline. I'm creating a safe place to be doing the journey, so we can bounce in and out of life and sort of bring ourselves over to the journeyscape to do this work, to create this mapping that allows us to step onto the path and redefine our life, to be in process, and then to see the movement and the momentum and the transformation that happens within any sort of timeline of a journey. It's brilliant and beautiful. And I know that there are more of us that are on the fence and thinking about this journey and how it fits. So I hope that this gives you a little bit more information about the power of creative mapping and everything that I have ever done in this work for the last 20 years always includes this element of mapping. But Alchemy of the Heart and Wild Essence this year is a completely reconstructed container, brand new material, and a whole new process. So we're really leaning into a new body of work, and you're always going to get a new piece of your story. So come and think about it, but really, last call. I'm actually not going to pop in again. We begin tomorrow. And you may get one more email reminder from me if you're on my email list, but if you're not, this is it. So you have about 24 hours to say yes and join us. All of the bonuses go away after tomorrow. And so you have about up until about evening tomorrow if you're in Europe, and midnight on the West Coast at 9 p.m. No, midnight on the East Coast at 9 p.m. on the West. You're going to have all of those numbers go away. All of those benefits and bonuses, $500 value for 2 payments of $130. So there's a lot of value here, 10 weeks of creative journey work and forever access to this class. I don't want you to miss it. So thank you for being here, and use the whole concept of creative mapping to infuse your art and life.